The Kaleidoscope Name project requires the use of a square piece of paper. If you have been doing this assignment in class, you have been given a pre-cut square of paper. If you are working from home and you don't have paper that's square size, you can turn any rectangular sheet of paper into a square by taking the short edge and folding it so that it lines up with the bottom edge. So if I take my upper right corner and bring it down to the bottom edge, I'm going to line up that short edge with the long edge on the bottom and give it a crease. You would then take a pair of scissors and cut this rectangular strip off. If you don't have scissors at home, you can also rip the paper, but you first want to fold the paper and create a very sharp crease. Use your fingernail. You would then fold the paper the other way, apply pressure, and then you can carefully rip the excess off. If you have scissors, scissors are preferable, but if you don't have scissors, you can still turn any rectangular piece of paper into a square piece of paper. With a square of paper, you're going to fold this paper to create lines of symmetry or reflection lines that you will use to create your name kaleidoscope. Fold the square into a rectangle. Your folds don't have to be perfect. You're going to get them pretty close, so don't fret if you have tiny, tiny slivers of the paper poking out here. Fold your rectangle into a square. We're going to unfold the paper. So we currently have a set of crosshairs in the creases of our paper. We're going to fold the upper left corner to the bottom right corner to make a triangle. And now we're going to fold the upper right corner to the bottom left corner. Make a slightly smaller triangle. Your creases are to make the transfer and reflection process easier. When we unfold our paper, it does kind of spring back at you. Some people find it helpful to crease the creases that you have back on themselves so that the paper lies more flat while you're working. We have 8 triangles now. The triangles are defined by the creases. We're going to work on the left-hand triangle that has a horizontal line at the bottom and a diagonal line right here. For this project, you have to use your name to create the design. So you can use your first name, or a nickname, or your last name, or the initials in your name. For the sake of the tutorial, I am going to use the initials in my name. You're going to draw the letters of your name normally at first, as in you're going to use print. You can choose to use cursive if you want a challenge. If you're in 6th or 8th grade, block letters are something you should consider. 8th graders do have to use block or bubble letters. That is, letters that are shapes and not just line. And I will explain what that means and show you an easy way to make block or bubble letters. I have to fit all 3 of my initials in this space. I'm going to make all of the letters touch the bottom crease and the diagonal crease, kind of like when you were learning how to draw your name as a child. I'm going to start with an S. And then the C. and then the O. Remember, you should be using your initials, not Miss Orchard's initials. If I were in 5th grade or 6th grade, at this point in the project, I could move forward to the transfer process. If I'm in 8th grade, I do have to turn this into bubble or block letters. If you're in 6th grade, you could also consider doing this. 5th graders, you may want to try making bubble or block letters for this assignment, but it is much more challenging. The easy way to turn letters into block or bubble letters is by tracing the line that creates the letter. Most letters are made out of lines. Some letters are already shapes, such as O, or some letters have shapes in them, such as B or P or Q. To turn my S into a block letter, I'm going to trace this center line. I'm going to trace around the outside of it. I still have to follow the rule of touching the bottom crease and the diagonal crease. I can't draw past them. So what ends up happening is if I trace around the outside of that center line, I have to stop when I hit the crease. I can pick up the line again from the crease to trace around my center line. I would then erase my center line. If you have leftover graphite marks after you erase, don't panic too much. You do end up coloring this artwork in. If I were to do the same process with the C, I'm going to start by tracing around the C. And I have to remember, I can't go past the creases that create the triangle. You can make the letters touch or overlap within the triangle if you want, or you don't have to. That is up to you. The more enclosed spaces that you create, the more dynamic or visually interesting your artwork becomes. So I can see I'm already creating some interesting negative shapes in here. With the O, I really could just trace a circle in the middle of my O, and that would turn it into a bubble or block letter. For the sake of consistency, I am going to trace around the outside as well. It also makes it a little bit bigger. Remember, I have to stop on my creases. With bubble or block letters, whether or not you have corners or you have curves is a personal artistic choice. So I've created corners. You might choose to create curves. After you've created your name, whether or not you're using just print, as in a 5th grader, or possibly a 6th grader, or whether you're turning them into block letters, you need to decide how you're going to transfer your design next. The technique is the same, but the material can be different. So I could use a regular old pencil, but some people find it easier to use a crayon because the wax in the crayon will transfer more easily than a regular pencil. But the graphite in your pencil will work fairly well. If you have oil pastels at home, you could also consider using oil pastels. To make this transfer process more easy, I'm going to trace my letters and make them darker. So I'm pushing down. After I trace my letters to make them darker, I'm going to use my creases to fold my paper. I want to keep my design on the inside of my fold. So I'm going to fold my paper on this diagonal crease. The creases you've already made should make this easier. And I need to apply pressure to the back of this triangle because my design is underneath it. In person, I can actually see my design. It's not really showing up super well on my camera. At home, probably the best tool to make the transfer process easier would be a big tablespoon. If you don't have access to a tablespoon, you could also use a popsicle stick or the round end of a marker. In person, we use the rounded corners of a glue bottle to push down. For this video, I'm going to use a popsicle stick, and I'm rubbing in circular motions, and I'm actually trying to follow the contours or the edges of the letters that I can see through my paper. And what this is doing is pushing the graphite from one side of the paper to the other, and it will create an imprint or a transfer. If you used crayons or oil pastels, this process will be even easier and you'll see results sooner. I do recommend that you stand up while you're applying pressure because it's easier to apply more pressure and push down harder if you're standing. You can unfold your paper to check your progress. I can see that it's transferring fairly well, but I need to go over the bottom here and this C a little bit more so I can see it more clearly. So I would refold my paper. With my design transferred, it's very light, so I need to use my pencil, or if I had been using a crayon or an oil pastel, I would use the same material to trace it again. Okay, so I have now a reflection of the letters, and because I stopped my outlining when I reached that fold or crease, it's creating a really interesting kind of shape where that C is meeting up with the reflected C and where the S is meeting up with the reflected S. After folding along the diagonal fold to create a triangle, we're now going to fold along the vertical fold to create a rectangle, and we're going to transfer again. After you've traced your transfer, you're going to fold it one more time along the horizontal axis. If you've been rotating this while you're tracing, right, that's very likely to happen. You really need to just figure out, okay, where do I have blank triangles and where do I need to fold to make the transfer process happen? If you haven't been following the same folding protocol that I have been, you will still be able to do this correctly. It's very difficult to do this wrong as long as you're folding along the creases. So you may end up with randomly filled in triangles, which is something I observe very often. So it's just a matter of figuring out where do I need to fold and which triangles are being transferred. In this case, all 4 of these triangles are going to transfer nicely into these 4 triangles if I just fold along this crease right here. When you've completed the transfer process, you'll end up with a design kind of like this, but you will have your initials. Remember, 8th graders are using letters that are shapes, not just lines. 5th graders are using letters that are just lines, and 6th graders can also choose to do that, or 6th graders can choose to create letters that are shapes. This is what the artwork will look like with letters that are shapes. And this is what the artwork will look like with letters that are lines. This was created using crayons to transfer the design around. After you create your design, you're going to use your choice of media, that is colorful art material, to add color to your design. There is no requirement about how many colors, or there is no requirement about having your colors also be reflective. It is a more unified design when you do have the same shapes, the same color all the way around your kaleidoscope, but it doesn't have to be. That's not actually a requirement. So using whatever media you would like, you would color in your shapes. You can have areas of white so long as it's obvious that it was a design choice and not a matter of not really finishing the artwork.